Hi guys, Ed here.
Hi, Hugh here, and welcome to another edition of Tone Twins TV, and probably the smallest piece of equipment we've featured so far.
Until we do our plectrum roundup, then it'll be
real treat for
the
everyone.
smallest bit of kit. You've probably seen this on top of a lot of our amps in the shoots we've done. And what is it?
Well, basically it's an attenuator. It's an attenuator that you can make yourself. You plug your speaker cable into the input, and the output goes to your speaker, and you switch it on, and you can set the overall level that you're playing at to anything you like, from full volume all the way down to whisper quiet.
This is dirt simple to take a little bit of volume off your amp. And
Or a lot
really
of volume
useful.
off your amp.
Definitely. We find them most useful perhaps to take a chunk of volume out, lets your amp drive a bit more compression, a bit more tactile feel.
Yeah.
Pretty neutral in that circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, we use it because, we don't want the neighbours coming around complaining when we're trying to shoot videos. It's a very, very simple box. They're quite cheap to make. So the purpose of the video today is basically to show you how to make one of these if you choose to do so. We'll give you a parts list and all kinds of stuff. We'll also refer you to the article that I wrote for Guitar Magazine. But if you want us to build one of these for you, just write in and hopefully we can put one together for you as well. Very, very simple. It's got an on-off switch. It's got a three-way switch to add a little bit of brightness or a lot of brightness. Well, a bit more brightness. And this is the level control. And it goes from 0 to 11.
Perfect. One louder.
Or quieter.
Or quieter. So we hope you enjoy, and by all means, build yourself one, guys. They're cheap to make, really not expensive parts, and we find them really useful. So I hope you enjoy the video.
These are the component parts for the L pad. I'm still waiting for the capacitors to arrive for the bright switch, but yeah, two mono jack sockets, two switches, one of which is the on-off switch. I go for really chunky switches with these because they get a lot of power running through them. This one is three-way, so got bright, bypass and brighter. It just to add a little bit of the high frequency content bleed through, which kind of compensates for what happens when you're using a lot of attenuation on the guitar signal. This is the guts of the attenuator because it's the actual L pad, and if you look at it, I don't know if you can see that. There are actually two coils of wire, so two wire wound resistors in here, one further inside and one on the outside. So the way it works is, let's say for example, the one coil is actually connected in parallel with the speaker, and it's, let's say that's set to 8 ohms, the speaker's 8 ohms, so they can combine in parallel to create 4 ohms. So that means if the other coil is 4 ohms, it's connected in series, the amplifier sees 8 ohms. So that ratio, or that relationship between the two coils, irrespective of where this is set, will always ensure that the amplifier sees an 8 ohm load. It's really quite simple, and it's exactly the way a lot of really high-end attenuators work, one of which is actually the universal audio aux. The difference between the aux and this is that the aux is a stepped attenuator. It's switched rather than continually variable. As an attenuator, I prefer this type. Otherwise, they all seem to be a little bit too loud or a little bit too quiet. Of course, this is a much simpler device that we're making here, and it doesn't have the speaker simulation technology. It doesn't have all the other goodies that come with universal audio aux, and it's not a dummy load. But for simple attenuation of amplifier level, this will do the job, arguably better. This is the box as it arrives, with the base and all the screws. So I've got to drill this out for the L pad and all the switches and the jack connectors and also the ventilation holes. So in order to do that, rather than mark the box itself, I apply masking tape to the box and draw out where all the holes need to go. And the other advantage of having the masking tape is it prevents the drill bit from slipping around when you're trying to start the hole. So I'm going to get this taped up and mark the box out. Okay, it's time to mark up this box for drilling, and the first thing to do is establish the center line. You can work in centimeters or inches. I tend to prefer inches, to be honest. And this one is 2 5/8 across. So just going to take my set square. So center line, and I can continue this around the corner. Oops. Like that. Okay, need to mark where everything's going to go. I'll provide the dimensions with a diagram to accompany the video. Okay, so that is where the L pad goes, right down the bottom there. This is where the switch is going to go. Notice I'm drawing on the masking tape rather than the box itself. Okay. And that's where the jack sockets are going to go. The other thing I want to do is drill a bunch of holes in the side of the unit here and here, just basically for ventilation. As I said, the L pad dissipates the energy by turning it into heat, and I obviously don't want it to get too hot and start burning, so a bit of airflow through the unit is a good way to, or the only way really, to keep this running as cool as possible. Okay, this is probably the most tedious bit of the project really, is opening up the holes for all the component parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a drill bit to establish all the holes, and then I'm going to use these things which are called cone cutters. And if you need to make large holes in metal objects, it's a really good way to go. The other thing, if you have one, which is really handy, is digital calipers, because you can measure the diameter of the hole that's needed for each and every one of the parts. For example, this is a switch. I'm reading 11.66 millimeters, so I'll probably just drill this one out to 12 mil, and that'll be absolutely fine. And these cone cutters actually have the steps marked, so you get 6 mil, 8 mil, 10 mil, 12 mil. So basically I can just measure all these parts, write down the size of the hole that I need next to each and every one, and then drill them really quickly. So I'll show you how to do that. Okay, got our drill bit attached. Just line it up on top of the hole. Probably shouldn't have your drill bit, your fingers directly under your drill bit, but I wasn't pressing very hard. The drill does all the work really, or the bit does all the work. Okay, so I've got to do all these on the side. This is where it gets a little bit tedious. I've already established that I need 12 mil holes for these switches, and just check that they're both the same. Yeah, one's slightly wider than the other, but 12mm will do for both of those. So the first one goes in already to the pilot hole that I've drilled, so it's already 4mm wide. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can count them as this goes in. Here we go. Perfect. This is 8.8, so we need 9mm. The steps in here are steps of 2, so I'm going to swap this out and I'm just going to drill the box with a 9mm drill bit. Right, do these holes on the side now, and we also need to do the jack sockets. Okay, that's all the drilling done. Word of warning, the metal burr that's, or shavings or whatever you want to call them, that are produced as a result of this drilling procedure can be razor sharp, so be really careful. If you're doing this with a pedal box which has already got finish on it, they will scratch up the finish, so you need to be really careful with that. Maybe work on a piece of carpet offset, or offcut rather, or something like that. But keeping the work area clean is much more important when you're using a box that already has finish on it. The other thing I would say is that keep all your electrical components well away from the drilling area. For instance, the L pad, I've already opened it up to show you, and I had to keep that well away from the drilling area, because the last thing I want is shards of metal falling into the L pad itself and potentially bridging little gaps and messing up the function, because that's actually the most expensive part of the component in this whole kit, really. You'll find little stray bits of metal burr in the holes. The other place to look for bits of burr is on the inside of these holes. Sometimes a little bit can cling on. Actually made a slight mistake with this one here. It just slipped down an extra notch, but it's not going to be any kind of a problem, because the switch will just clamp in place, and also give me a better opportunity to kind of align these two, because they were a little bit out when I drilled it. It's not as accurate to drill freehand as it is to drill with a pillar drill. Okay, so the next thing for this box now is to get the decal transfer on here and spray it up, and then it'll be ready for assembly. And it's time to do the graphics for the box, and this is a piece of decal paper, and I've drawn up some lettering in graphics program, printed it out, and I've sprayed it with some of this stuff, which basically just protects the ink from being washed off when I put the decal paper in some water. So what I'm going to do to prep the box is just wipe it down with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, just to make sure that the surface is clean and free of grease, so we can get good adhesion with the decals. Set this off to one side, And this is now going to be cut out, and we can attach it to the box. It'll need to be left overnight to really dry off properly. Then the box will actually be sprayed with this to seal the decal on there, and also to just give it a nice appearance. Okay, got a bowl of warm water, and this is the decal I cut out. I don't know if you noticed earlier, but what I did was I actually printed the outline of the decal with a very, very light, thin, light grey line, and that was my guide for cutting it out. Any bits of that line that end up still on the edge of the decal just disappear when it's on the box. So let's place this in here. So we'll need a short while just for the decal to start to release from the backing paper. Okay, this is beginning to move. Sometimes when you put this stuff on, it tends to wrinkle up, but as it dries it pulls taut, so it should end up looking pretty good. This is great if you're making your own pedals too, because it's a nice way to get pro looking graphics without having to pay to get your boxes printed professionally. Just making sure I get all the air bubbles out of there. It's a little bit wrinkled on the end, and I'll sort that out now. Okay, so as I said, it looks a little bit wrinkly, but that will stretch itself out and lay flat when it dries. At least it usually does. All these holes are covered. Don't ever try and cut them out when the decal is still wet. Just leave it to dry. It pulls really tight like a drum skin, and then it's actually quite easy to just kind of cut them out with a craft knife, which I'll show you in a short while. Anyway, I'm just going to put a little graphic on the back there to demonstrate which is the input and output, because you don't want to get that confused if you're using one of these. And then I'm going to set this aside overnight. Right, the box has been sprayed, decals on, not looking too bad. So the time's come to actually start assembling this thing. So just got to load up all these bits and pieces, and then we can start soldering. One of these switches is 3-way and one is 2, so you're going to make sure you get these in the right way round. The 3-way switch is for the bright control. Just going to double check the alignment, then tighten everything up, and then we can start soldering. Wiring up time. Just working from circuit diagram that you can find on the guitar.com website, which has the original article on doing this particular attenuator. I'm just using cloth covered wire here, which is more than capable of coping with the kind of power involved with the attenuator. So this is just a little bridging connection, which is going to go on the bypass switch. I mean, strictly speaking, I don't think you actually need a bypass switch, but I like it to be there. Just going to bend these wires up and making good physical contact with the lugs of the switch. Okay, get this on. Tidy that up a little bit. Okay, so this is the input jack. So the next thing I need to do is take a connection from here to here. Always try and keep the tip of your soldering iron really clean. That is connecting the tip of the input jack to the on-off switch. There's the little bypass loop, and I'm going to take a connection from this tag here to the tip of the output jack. And that's basically the bypass part of the circuit all completely done and dusted. So I'm going to connect these two lugs now from the on-off switch onto the L pad itself, establish the ground connection as well. Okay, so this is actually the input to the L pad, which is going to lug number 1 of the L pad itself. I've marked them 1, 2 in the center and 3 on the outside. It's important that you get this the right way round. If you don't, the L pad doesn't work properly and your amplifier doesn't see the right impedance. And you can tell when you got it wrong if you've mixed up your number 1 and number 3, because your L pad will actually work back to front. Okay, should be at its quietest when it's turned fully anti-clockwise. I'm not going to do this solder joint just yet on number 1, because I'm going to need to do another connection there, and I want to keep the access to the hole. Right, let's get the second wire in. Again, I'm leaving the solder tag on the L pad itself unsoldered for the time being. Okay, but we're done with the on-off switch. That's all completely hooked up. So just going to use a piece of black cloth cable. I can actually run the black cable directly from pin 3 of the L pad to the sleeve connection on this jack here, because all I'm doing is grounding it. Okay, so this is basically wired up. This will work as an attenuator. The treble bypass switch wouldn't do a thing because we haven't actually got any capacitors hooked up, but this will work as an attenuator with an on-off switch. So if you didn't want to bother with the treble switching, the project would be done. That's basically it. But I'm going to take it a stage further. The reason for having the bright switch is that your perceptions of frequencies change depending on the volume that you're working at, and as attenuators are turned down, you start sensing that you're losing a little bit of clarity and a little bit of treble. You might sense that you're losing a little bit of bass as well. Not a lot you can really do about the bass side of things, but at more extreme attenuation levels, I prefer to use the bright or the brighter switch here, and it just lets a little bit of the more the treble frequencies through unattenuated, in much the same way as a treble bleed cap does on the volume control of an electric guitar. Okay, going to do a little connection now from this slug here, which is number 1, to the other side of the switch. And we're on to the last little bit. I'm soldering in 2 capacitors. This blue one here is 4.7 microfarad for the bright cap, And then the one on the other side, the black one, is 10 microfarad. These are not like treble controls, incidentally. This really, I mean, some of you, if you're hearing a shot, you won't even hear it because it's a very, very, very subtle effect. But basically, it just compensates very, very slightly for the loss of treble you get when you turn down, and it just puts in a little of the air frequencies back into it. It's very, very subtle, and some people don't even hear the difference. So, you know, if you decide to build one of these, you can kind of consider this optional. I can hear it, but not everybody does. Doesn't make me have super hearing. It just means I haven't done as many years of gigging as a lot of you guys. There we are, finished attenuator.
So I hope that was useful, guys, and we'd love to see your own versions if you do make yourself one of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Send your pictures in because we'd really enjoy that.
Let us know on Instagram at Tone Twins TV. It's an easy place to share pictures and stuff. And we'll see you next time.
Double.
Without.